Namaskar, hello and welcome viewers. You're watching the special presentation of Sansad TV, Bills and Insight, your one-stop destination for views, news and analysis of proposed legislations of India that have far-reaching implications and impact your life. I'm your host Kriti Mishra, and today the spotlight is on the Wildlife Protection Amendment Bill of 2021. The bill seeks to conserve and protect wildlife through better management of protected areas. Before the detailed analysis, let's take a look at the highlights of the bill. The bill empowers the central government to regulate or prohibit the import, trade, possession or proliferation of invasive alien species. It proposes to insert a new chapter in the Principal Act for Regulation of International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. The bill also proposes to rationalize and amend the schedules which list out wildlife species. So why was the bill needed? Well, the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 was enacted to provide for the protection of wild animals, birds and plants with a view to ensure the ecological and environmental security of the country. The Act has been amended several times in 1982, 1986, 1991, 1993, 2002, 2006 and 2013. The proposed amendment of 2021 is likely to be the most expansive so far in scope. It covers more areas of legislation, from trade in wild species to permitting filmmaking in protected areas and controlling the spread of invasive species. The bill was referred to the Parliamentary Standing Committee and the panel has presented a detailed report. And for discussing the provisions of the bill and recommendations of the Parliamentary Standing Committee, I am joined by an illustrious panel of guests. Joining us through virtual platform, Mr. Prakash Javadekar. He is member of the Rajya Sabha and he's also the former Minister of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. Also joining us, Dr. Shekhar Kumar Niraj, Principal Chief Conservator of Forests, Biodiversity Conservation, Tamil Nadu. And in the studio, we have with us Ms. Neha Sinha. She is Conservation and Biologist author. Also joining us in the studio, young professionals and students. I welcome all of you on Sansad TV and thank you so much for joining us. And Mr. Javadekar, let me begin the program with you. India is party to the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. It is an international agreement between governments to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants are not threatened. The convention requires countries to regulate the trade of all listed specimens through permits. In that context, take us through the importance of this bill, sir.
I think let us understand the reality of India and the world. I am recently watching again the Netflix series Our Planet. And what they are describing all over the world, that flora and fauna is reduced all over the world, even the wild animals. And only in India it is growing. Now why we are strengthening this mechanism, yes, monitoring mechanism, and as well as management through management authorities, because CITES, we are party to it.
Yes.
38,000 species of flora and fauna are definitely being monitored by in the CITES agreement. So we want to strengthen that mechanism. I'll just explain one aspect of it. We will now have standing committee for State Wildlife Board.
Yes.
I was chairman. We have in Central Standing Committee. Because National Board of Wildlife, the chairman is Prime Minister. In State Wildlife Board, the chairman is State Chief Minister. But we must have every month a meeting. And therefore, we need to have a standing committee where all the experts will be there. All the officials concerned will be there. All the applicants will be there. But simultaneously, we cannot stop necessary development of the country, right, just because the State Wildlife Board meeting doesn't take place. So the Minister of Environment and Forest in that respective state will head the standing committee and there will be a full-fledged meeting. They can take decisions every month and the progress won't be stopped. And the preservation and conservation efforts will be strengthened further. So this is the need of the hour. So there are so many provisions in this amendment that this can really take us to a new height.
All right, so as Mr. Javadekar is saying that it is all about striking that fine balance, and of course, this bill has come after detailed study. That's the point that he's putting forth. But Mr. Kumar, soon after bill's introduction, several wildlife and legal experts questioned some of the clauses in the bill, saying that they are counterintuitive to the objectives of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. I'd like to understand from you, what are the concerns surrounding this bill?
I look at amendment from two angles. Why do we amend some acts? One could be the reason that it is glossing over some issues, such as in this case tackling the non-native species matter related to non-native species, as we know that CITES has not. CITES has no backup legislation in this country, so probably we are compensating for that. And second, maybe this is could be an opportunity in which whatever the structural weaknesses are there in the act, and because of which we are not able to effectively implement on the ground, maybe this is an opportunity which could be used for making up for that and strengthening the act further, so that implementation is really effective. And when we combine both of them, then probably the amendment can become extremely effective, a good mechanistic. But then, is it really happening? Because
Yes.
when I was going through amendment, when I was submitting my points, of course, CITES have been involved for a long time. I was CITES System Management Authority, and even that point of time, we had drafted a CITES Act and submitted to the government. And then, as we know that as the country grows, because everything is connected to economy, as sir said that economically we are growing, and it's really needed also to grow. And so keeping the balance is what is something which we're looking at. So it is very clear that we are growing. Per capita income is increasing. We are in league with the countries like China and other countries, and therefore it is also likely that the challenges which are going to come as a fallout of the economic development is going to be also huge. Are we going to match up with that? As I remember that, when I was a chief warden of Tamil Nadu, we have about pending 9,000 applications for bringing imported wildlife from different countries to this country. Now, they will also come up with a lot of related issues, pathogenic issues like diseases, and so on. So CITES probably, when we introduce the chapter of CITES, that will address all those issues, and it's going to actually be long pending. Almost 40 years we've been waiting for this. So I hope that with this amendment, it may come. But probably, when I was analyzing the amendment bill, I think it still requires a lot more to be done in order to make those CITES provisions really effective, so that we can address all those issues. Then second, when I said that when we use this opportunity also to remove the structural weaknesses and look at the various schedules and also different kinds of provisions which deal with the law implementation, probably this opportunity could have been used a little bit more effectively to address them and really add a lot of teeth in implementation of this act. And number of sections are like that. The definitions of zoo, rescue center, lumping at this moment lumped together. Issues like Section 55B delegation to the officers who can also contribute to the enforcement. Issues such as and then all those connected proviso will come along with the CITES chapter when we add to that, and so a full-fledged chapter of CITES which can correspond to the what we're not thinking about Schedule 3 or 4 of this act, 4 of this act. So those changes. And then also adding, probably this is the time when we also look at the penalty provisions,
Yes,
which
sir.
may look nice with this amendment, also making 25,000 to 1 lakh rupees. But will it hold really good for the way we are on a fast trajectory growth, path of the economic development? Will it really be crucial? Really be effective tomorrow, say 4 years later, 2 years later, 3 years later? So I think probably it's also time to make it more stringent, those provisions, especially the real deterrence is still the fine, because as I said, since as we grow economically more, we have more capacity also to pay for anything.
And of course, one being the challenges of economic development, and second, of course, how strong a deterrence can be put forth. Neha, I'd like to understand from you. The moot question remains, will this amendment bill save the rich biodiversity of our country while also catering to the needs of economic development of our country?
Thank you for that question. Thank you for having me. Mr. Javadekar and Mr. Niraj have already outlined that we have this new provision for management authorities for CITES. But CITES is more about trade of animals, and trade and conservation are of course not the same thing. So if we are to talk about wild animals in wild habitats, it's important to understand that this act did require to be updated because it's a really old act, 1972, and we've discovered many new wild animals since then. Science and scientists, biologists have discovered many kinds of animals. So we need to actually start with making a list of all the wild animals we have and put them in this act. And the bill is good, but it is not complete. There are many animals that are missing, and there's a need to have a wider consultation also. As Mr. Niraj said, we need to do a little bit more work. So wider consultation with scientists, botanists, even ethnozoologists, etc. The second aspect is that the bill talks about vermin, which is animals that we can put down because they are a big problem for us. So typically vermin have been things like crows and cockroaches, but the current bill actually says you can put the entire Schedule 2 of the new act as vermin animals. Meaning any animal that causes any damage to us, or we don't like it, like a jungle cat, maybe a fox, maybe a hyena, can actually be made a vermin. And the problem with this is that we need scientific assessments, we need population assessments before we say that the entire species should be declared vermin, because when it gets declared a vermin, you can actually kill as many as you want, and obviously when you're killing animals, there's nobody there to look. So we've had kind of vermin declaration for nilgai and for rhesus macaque, the monkey that you see near Parliament before. But if the new bill becomes law, you actually have more than 100 animals that can actually become vermin, and I do think this needs to be reconsidered because we are growing, as you said, we are growing, and human-wildlife conflict will also grow as we grow. So if you make a special economic zone next to a forest, there's going to be conflict, or if we have any kind of big infrastructure near the coastline or near forests, there's going to be more and more conflict. So we need to have a balanced approach also for the wild animal. So more scientific approach should be taken for declaration of vermin, and not just saying that we don't like this animal. And finally, it's important to look at wildlife along with wild habitat. So obviously they're not living in our houses, they're living in wild habitat. It would be nice if the science component of this new bill is strengthened even further, and we have more consonance with the Forest Conservation Act of India, which we already have, as well as the Environment Protection Act of India.
All right, Neha, you made a very important point there about vermin. Let me take that to Mr. Javadekar. Mr. Javadekar, as Neha is saying that we can't have vermin on our whims and fancies, we need to have a scientific structure behind that, and probably that's where the bill needs to be reconsidered. How do you assuage her concerns, sir?
So, let us understand first the Indian ethos. Indians don't kill animals. They love them. They think part of their life system. And therefore, we befriend not only trees, but all animals are worshipped only in India. That is one. That is our ethos. So we don't like, the farmers don't like, and I'll give one concrete example. I had a meeting of farmers, and there they were complaining that the elephants are coming in our farms and destroying the crop. So I asked forest officers, what can be done? One farmer stood up and said, we are not asking for killing anybody. And I'm happy to report that 26 states we have surveyed through LiDAR technology, through drones and aeroplanes, small aeroplanes, and we have prepared DPR of one forest in each state. And now states are eager to implement that in all forests. And there comes the problem not only of water augmentation, having watershed development,
Yes,
but more importantly, people are thinking of having removing the invasive species. Because what happens is, I have seen it in Bandipur and everywhere, that when elephant eats the sugarcane, immediately the invasive plants, lantana and others come up. So that is have to stop. And we have taken up a very big, ambitious program, each forest-wise, so that wildlife will get enough food and water in forest area. That is the real solution. And therefore, declaring vermin is not a fancy. It's a reality that we have ample number of wildlife, and sometimes they grow beyond expectation or beyond management capacity. And then amongst them, there are territorial fights for which we can't do anything. What happens is, vermin is declared just for a period and in a very limited area. What can be managed? This is management of excessive population in that particular area. And therefore, it is our part of our culture, ethos. And this is why I can say that we should not have misplaced suspicion about provision for vermin, because that is already there. Poaching is the real issue.
Yes.
And that has to be dealt with seriously, and we are doing it. And there is now more than many poachers are killed, and many poachers are apprehended and put to harsh punishments. So this is really the provision. So I think it is helping better management of forest resources.
Mr. Javadekar, I'd also like to take a quick comment on elephants. Many say that this bill, when passed, will also encourage commercial trade of elephants. What is your take, sir?
No, it is not, because in our country, elephants are purchased and sale is approved in our because it's a different kind of wildlife. But therefore, many temples, many people also have that. They have to follow the rules. They have to take proper care of the elephants. We have to have a scientific view. And we must empower the machinery with a scientific instrumentality. That this amendment is contemplating.
Absolutely, sir. The focus has to be on reducing the man and wild conflict. But talking about another aspect before I take questions from our audience, Dr. Kumar, the rationalization of the schedule for animals and plants was long overdue. The bill has streamlined the scheduling of species from the original 6 schedules to just 3. The Parliamentary Committee said that while it was in agreement with the rationalization and reduction of schedules or species, it finds a number of species missing in all the 3 schedules. What is your take, sir?
I fully agree, and I agree to that point that the earlier point I think made by Neha. Because I don't think really enough science is used for amendment. So therefore, we are not knowing about the species population. I mean, our entire approach is very tiger and elephant centric. And now, of course, cheetah is there, and then we have rhinos. But then what about the smaller species? What about species which we don't even know about the population? Like pangolin, whether they're still there or not in most of these range areas, are also we're not sure, because no assessment has been done. True. So therefore, I think that change and amendment of the schedules, and that has to be completely based on science. There should be very targeted projects of it. And I know that there are very few people who really come forward to take up those kind of difficult species to study, especially like pangolin, say monitor lizard, or even sharks, some of the shark species, whale shark and dugongs, difficult species. But then, I mean, this is a compulsion. This is a mandate on us, which we must do, whichever possible ways it is to be done. So therefore, I think that it has to be relooked very dynamically, that the schedules and then its species population, whether they are correctly placed in certain schedule or they need to be moved. But it cannot just be done arbitrarily. See, I was in the amendment committee in 2002 when we brought invertebrates, sharks, and sea cucumbers and sea horses, all of those species in Wildlife Protection Act in 2001 and 2. But I remember that when we're doing this exercise, a lot of sentiment also was there along with little science, which should be the other way around. A lot of science should be there with little sentiments. So because it has to be made very, very practically, really something which, if we're going to strengthen it, then it should be very practical, and it should be something which is futuristic.
Yes, sir.
A strong scientific authority with real good ecologists and scientists on that. They must, just like the CITES, when the WSCMC works round the clock, 24 hours a day, and every minute of it. So similarly, we should also have a strong panel of scientists, and we must call the scientific authority, which must study all the species under lens or question or under the issue, must read that, and then based on their inputs only, that should be only the
that should be the criteria. Completely out of time. I need to take few questions from our audience. Please go ahead, introduce yourself and speak your mind.
I wanted to ask, what are these specimens listed in the appendices under sites for which a new schedule has been inserted?
Neha, would you like to take that one?
So this is about import and export of wild animals or wild plants, any wild thing. And we are a member of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, which is CITES. So it kind of regulates trade. So for example, India has been very strong that we are not going to trade in tiger skins, or we are not going to trade in elephant ivory or rhino horn. And there are many countries in the world that want to be able to trade in these things because it's very lucrative. It costs a lot of money, it has a lot of value. So this is a kind of a very welcome insertion into the bill, which is looking at creating a management authority as well as a scientific authority to understand and to regulate the trade of these kind of endangered species. So it could be an orchid, it could be a wild animal, it could be a plant, even things for medicinal value. So there are appendixes, which means that different, the more endangered it is, it will be in Appendix 1, less endangered appendix 2. So we are part of this global agreement in which all of trade in these kind of wild animals or species is regulated. So that is what it is, yeah.
Next question, please.
Why was the schedule for the worming species removed from the Act?
Wild animals in the Act were in 4 schedules, mostly the birds and animals, and now they've been put in 2 schedules. So they've kind of brought the schedules together, and the vermin is still there. But they're saying that entire Schedule 2 can become vermin, which is the point I raised that, maybe it's a bit excessive. And so basically you have animals like fox and hyena, certain kinds of birds, porcupine, mongoose, all those kind of animals. So vermin basically is an animal that causes harm to our property or our lives. And obviously vermin need to be taken down. There's no question that we cannot kind of make people hate animals. That's not the intention. We have to protect animals while having a kind of balanced view. Having said that, we kind of need scientific assessments.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Because we can't just kill all the...
Thank you, ma'am.
Time for last question now.
Aparna Jha this side. So as we see, Article 18 and 21 of our Constitution states equal right to law and also protection of lives of animal. So if we look at vermin, which has no scientific logic behind the criteria, so in that case, is the central government not having special delegation and unrestricted power in this case to categorize any animal in the category of vermin?
Mr. Javadekar, would you like to take that one?
It is not the case of giving power to, because let us understand, central government and our Indian people and the Indian society as a whole, we have preserved nature. Last year, Australia culled more than 3,000 camels because of their paucity of water. We have never done this kind of things. Massive cullination in Western countries, you don't see any animals because their number is dipping day in and day out. 300 people in India 300 years ago died because to protect the trees. That is Indian culture. And so our people will never approve of killing unnecessarily animals. It is not a permanent order because people want to stay and we will finish off the jungle. No way. We are increasing it. We are building corridors with new policies.
So he allays all those concerns there and says that the bill seeks to increase the species protected under the law and implement the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. On that note, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Javadekar, Dr. Kumar and Neha. Next week, we'll return with incisive analysis of another important bill. Till then, take care and stay tuned to Sansad TV. Namaskar.